Welcome to our training video about user and group control. There are several options to set up access rights for Synology NAS. For simple and small environments, the DSM's built-in local user control will be used. For larger environments, we can also run an Active Directory or LDAP server on the NAS or integrate the NAS into an existing domain so that user control is completely taken over by the existing directory server. In this video, we focus on the user and group management directly in the DSM, which is often used at home or in small offices. We start with the explanations directly here in the interface. First, we open the control panel and see the items user and group. First, we go into item user. Here we see already created users and some information. On the system side, the admin is created and the guest user, which is deactivated by default, as we can see from the status. With the button Edit or double click on the user, we can change and view his settings. We will go into the individual points in more detail in a moment. We create a new user first. We do this by clicking here on Create. We first give a name and then describe the activity of the person in question. Then a password is assigned, the security level of which is directly displayed here. The new user can be sent a notification via email, which we leave out for now, and we determine whether the user can change his password himself. In this case, we allow this, so do not set a check mark here. After click on the next, we can assign the user to a group. We have 3 system-defined groups, which are all displayed here. If we had already created our own group, it would appear here, of course. Usually only the groups administrators and users are relevant for us here. If the user is to work with the DS without restrictions and should have access to everything, then we check the box administrators. If we do not want to grant full access but only grant the user certain options without approving changes to the system, then we check the box only for users. In our case, we now give Yanka administrator rights. In the next tab, we can set permissions for each shared folder. The classics are read and write or no access. An important information at this point. If you have installed the photo station, the photo folder is grayed out and we cannot set permissions in this menu. Permissions for the photo folder are then set directly within Photo Station. Below we can see more information about authorization priorities and the hierarchy. NA stands for no access, RW for read and write access, and RO for read only. This is not so relevant for a simple authorization assignment, but if, for example, a user belongs to a group whose settings overlap with the user's individual authorizations, then this information is important. For example, if the group the user belongs to has no rights to the video folder, but if we again assign read-write permissions to the video folder for the user himself, the no access rule of the group would, as described below, be evaluated higher than the read-write rule. Thus, the user would have no access to the video folder. We now assign all permissions and click on Next. Here we get the hint that the quota for Yanka is unlimited. This is because we have added Yanka to the administrator group. If we undo this, for example, just check the box for users, we will be able to set a quota here. There is now a small difference between NAS with BTRFS and the ext4 file system in terms of storage quotas and storage space limitation. BTRFS systems can define the storage space that the user is allowed to store on the system per shared folder. This allows us to flexibly determine how many megabytes or gigabytes a user can put into the video, music, or any other folder of their choice. With ext4 systems, however, we cannot set this per folder, but only for the whole volume. This difference is, for example, relevant if we want to run a time machine backup to a backup folder on our NAS and limit it to, for example, 500 gigabytes. With ext4, we would have to create our own time machine or backup users and provide/limit them with 500 gigabytes to the whole volume. With BTRFS, I can use my own user and set the 500 gigabyte limit just to the backup folder where my time machine backup runs. After the user quota settings, follow the rules for which applications the user may use. In the last point, we could then restrict the user in the upload and download rates of individual programs or protocols. Note, if we don't want to control this per user, but generally for a packet or protocol, we can do this in the network settings in the item Traffic Control. With a click on Continue, follows a summary of the settings just made for this new user, which I now confirm and thus create a new user. In case of a subsequent user editing, we will get some additional setting options. For applications, we can then, for example, allow or deny access only via a specific IP address. If I check this box, a new window will open and I can enter the local IP of the user's office PC. This ensures that the user can only use this application, for example, Active Backup, from his workstation in the office. The person would then not be able to access this application from another device, such as his mobile phone or PC at home. In the menu item User, we have another important function, namely the Password Security function under the tab Advanced. Here we can set the minimum requirements for passwords as administrator. For example, make it mandatory to include special characters or select a certain minimum length for password. Password expiration. We can also expire passwords and force users to change their password after period X to increase security. We also find the two-factor verification at this point, adjustable for administrators as well as for all users. With the two-factor verification, an additional code must be entered after the user and his password. This code is generated by a two-factor authenticator, for example, app Google Authenticator. The last item under the tab Advanced is the user home service. This service creates a separate folder for each user as we know it from the other systems, like for example the folder My Documents in Windows. Only this user has access to this folder beside the admins. Let us now come to the point of groups. Groups make sense especially if we have several users and want to assign identical or similar permissions to them. Classically, this would be departments within a company or external users to whom we want to give very limited access. In the overview, we see, as with the users, our already created groups. We can edit these groups or add users to them if we didn't already do so when we created the respective users. How to create the group? The steps to create a group are identical to the steps to create a user. Therefore, we will not go into all points in detail again here. First, a name is assigned, then a description. Then the access to shared folders can be defined. Quotas, for example, storage quotas can be set. The accesses to applications are controlled. And in the last step, the traffic can be limited again. We do this once and have created the group marketing. Do we want to regulate access for applications afterwards? We can do this in the control panel in the advanced mode under the item privileges. We simply select the application, then click on Edit, and can assign rights for both users and groups. In case we want to set additional permissions of users or groups for subfolders, we can do this very fine-grained within the file station. For example, if the user or group can generally work with the main folder but must not have access to certain subfolders, we proceed as follows. We open File Station, select the shared folder, right-click on a subfolder, select Properties, then Permission. Here we can now select the user or a group, choose the type of the setting from Allow, for example, to Deny, and if we click and check all settings here now, we would deny all permissions for this subfolder. This means that the user Janka cannot access this subfolder anymore. We can perform this process for any subfolder, but please keep the hierarchies of the permissions in mind. Authorizations are always important with a central server, and the requirements vary depending on the deployment scenario. DSM's onboard resources provide us with a simple, intuitive, yet feature-rich user and group control. Optionally, we can also integrate the NAS into an existing domain or use our free add-on packages to turn it into dedicated LDAP or Active Directory server for our network.